What happens when one of the most famous women on the planet sits down expecting a friendly morning show chat, only to be blindsided by questions she never saw coming? That's exactly what unfolded when Kim Kardashian suddenly lost her composure live on television. The interview began like any other. Jenna was warm and smiling. The audience was buzzing with excitement, and Kim walked onto the set with her signature confidence. The opening minutes were standard morning show fluff, updates about Kim's latest business ventures, a few lighthearted jokes about her kids, and a polished breakdown of her shapewear line and upcoming projects. Everything was smooth, rehearsed, and predictable. But the tone shifted abruptly when Jenna's co-host, who had been quiet until then, leaned forward with a question that instantly froze the room. She brought up the criticism surrounding Kim's shapewear brand, specifically complaints about sizing, accessibility, and a price point that many felt contradicted Kim's message of inclusivity. Kim smiled, but it was noticeably tighter. And she chose her words carefully as she defended the quality and cost of her products. Before she could regain momentum, Jenna pressed further, questioning whether marketing to everyday women while being a billionaire herself created a tone-deaf contradiction. The audience fell silent. Kim's posture stiffened and her tone sharpened as she pushed back, insisting that she hadn't forgotten her roots and that success didn't negate her understanding of women from all backgrounds. But Jenna wasn't done. She pointed out that Kim could easily lower her prices and still profit, yet she chose not to. That accusation made Kim bristle. With visible irritation, she challenged the hosts, asking if they understood the economics of manufacturing or running a large-scale company. The co-host stepped in again, explaining that they spoke not as business experts, but as representatives of viewers who felt priced out by a brand claiming inclusivity. This time, Kim fired back harder. She insisted her brand was inclusive in terms of body types, not price, and accused the hosts of setting her up. She said she had come to discuss her work, not to be ambushed by accusations dressed as questions. Jenna tried to keep the conversation grounded, saying the questions were legitimate concerns raised for months by real customers. If Kim couldn't answer them, she said, that was her choice, but calling it an ambush was unfair. Kim, clearly frustrated now, argued that what wasn't fair was being invited under the guise of a normal interview, only to have her character and business attacked on live TV. Her voice rose slightly, revealing just how deeply the confrontation had rattled her. Kim shot back immediately, her voice tight with frustration, asking how Jenna and her co-host could call her tone-deaf when they had blindsided her on live television without any warning about the direction the interview would take. The atmosphere in the studio shifted sharply. Audience members glanced at one another, unsure whether to gasp, clap, or simply stay quiet. What had begun as a bright, friendly morning show appearance had now escalated into a full-blown confrontation. And it was obvious neither side intended to back down. Jenna kept her voice controlled as she reminded Kim that they were journalists and that asking hard questions came with the territory, especially when interviewing someone with Kim's influence. She pointed out that Kim had built an empire on relatability, telling women she understood their struggles and that the public had every right to question whether that was genuine or simply smart branding. Kim's eyes hardened. She snapped that Jenna knew nothing about her authenticity, nothing about what she dealt with on a daily basis, and that reading questions written by producers who had never built anything didn't give them the insight to lecture her on business or relatability. The co-host leaned in again, saying they weren't lecturing but asking, and the fact that Kim was reacting so defensively instead of answering directly was telling. Kim bristled at the word defensive, insisting she was being honest and accusing the hosts of framing every response in the worst possible light. She made it clear she had every intention of pushing back. Jenna pressed further, bringing up Kim's infamous get-up and work interview. She reminded Kim that despite claiming her words were taken out of context, the full footage didn't change the message. Jenna asked bluntly whether Kim still stood by those comments or regretted them. Kim inhaled slowly, visibly trying to steady herself, and said that if people listened instead of reading clickbait headlines, they would understand she had been talking about her own work ethic. The co-host cut her off, pointing out that Kim had made a sweeping claim that nobody wants to work, which went far beyond her personal experience. Asterisk. Kim admitted she had been frustrated at the time, tired of the constant narrative that everything had been handed to her. And while she might phrase it differently now, the core message remained. Success requires work. Jenna folded her arms and countered that while hard work was universal, Kim's reality wasn't. Kim had nannies, assistants, security, drivers, and entire infrastructure supporting her, while most women juggled multiple jobs and single parenthood without help. To them, hearing a billionaire tell them they don't work hard enough was insulting. Kim snapped back that she had never said that, accusing the hosts of twisting her words yet again. Asterisk. Jenna stood firm, saying they weren't twisting anything, they were asking Kim to take accountability, something the public wanted from influencers. Kim's face reddened as she insisted she had apologized more times than she could count. What more did they want? Should she flog herself on live television to satisfy them? The co-host cut in, saying no one expected that. It's only that Kim listened to the criticism instead of treating every question as a personal attack. Kim scoffed at the word problematic, saying it had become meaningless, and vented that she was tired of being held to a higher standard than male entrepreneurs who were never grilled like this. Asterisk. Jenna pushed back immediately, saying that wasn't true, and even if it were, it didn't excuse anything. She accused Kim of using sexism as a shield whenever she was questioned. Kim fired back that she wasn't hiding behind anything, that she was simply pointing out the reality of her position. She emphasized that they had invited her onto the show only to interrogate her about every controversial thing she'd ever said or done, as if she owed them a confession. Jenna remained steady, saying they weren't asking for a confession, but for a real conversation, not PR polished answers. Their viewers, she reminded Kim, were smart enough to tell the difference between authenticity and performance. Asterisk. Kim stared at Jenna, accusatory disbelief in her eyes. She asked how anyone could think she was performing when she was sitting there having the most uncomfortable, unguarded conversation of her life on live television. How much more genuine could they possibly want her to be? The co-host seized the moment, leaning in with one more pointed question, one that stopped the studio cold. If Kim wanted to be genuinely honest, she said, then she should answer this. Did she think she was out of touch with regular people? Not as an attack, just a real, honest question. Asterisk. The co-host didn't let up, asking Kim if she realized that living in a world most people couldn't even imagine might have affected her perspective. For a brief moment, Kim looked like she might engage honestly, but her expression quickly hardened. She acknowledged that her life was different, but said she would never apologize for her success or pretend she lived a normal life. That didn't make her out of touch. She insisted she still had feelings, still struggled, and that her problems, though different, were real. Jenna responded slowly, pointing out that Kim's problems included choosing which private jet to take or which mansion to stay in, and that it was unsurprising many people found her lifestyle unrelatable. Kim fired back that this was a reductive view, saying the hosts had no idea what she dealt with: the scrutiny, the pressure, the judgment, the inability to go anywhere without being photographed, and the harassment her children endured online. She demanded they stop dismissing her struggles simply because she had money. The co-host clarified that no one said her problems weren't real, but insisted there was a difference between acknowledging her unique circumstances and claiming to understand working-class women. That, she said, Kim did not and didn't need to, but she had to stop pretending. Kim's hands tightened on her chair as she insisted she'd never pretended to be anything she wasn't. And if people hated her for being successful, that was their issue. Jenna leaned forward, saying it wasn't about hate, but accountability. With a massive platform and influence over culture, Kim was bound to be called out when she promoted unrealistic beauty standards or made toned-up comments about work. That was consequence, not hatred. Kim repeated the word consequence with visible irritation, arguing that Jenna used it as though she were a criminal. She said she was a businesswoman and a mother who had worked incredibly hard. Yet she was being treated like she'd committed a crime. Jenna calmly clarified that no one said that, but pointed out that Kim benefited from man-perpetuated a system that profited from impossible beauty ideals. She accused Kim of promoting standards only achievable with surgery and filters, then selling products promising women they could look the same. Kim's eyes widened at the word manipulative, insisting she'd been open about her procedures and hid nothing. The co-host countered that Kim had been selectively open, admitting things only after years of denial and only when the truth became undeniable. Even then, she downplayed the extent, making it seem like her look was accessible through products and hard work. Kim snapped that she never told anyone they needed to look like her. She posted photos because it was her job and her brand, and she couldn't control how people felt. Jenna hardened her tone, pointing out that Kim could control what she put into the world. She said young girls were getting plastic surgery to look like Kim. Teenagers were developing eating disorders. And at some point, Kim had to take responsibility for that influence. Kim's voice rose as she insisted she wasn't responsible for other people's choices, parents' decisions, or pre-existing mental health issues. The hosts, she said, were unfairly casting her as the villain in a much larger societal problem. The co-host countered that what wasn't fair was profiting off insecurity while pretending to empower women, editing photos beyond recognition, then selling products promising the same results. She accused Kim of creating the problem and selling the solution, calling it exploitation. Kim lurched forward, almost rising from her chair before sitting back down, visibly agitated. She argued that she'd done more for women than most ever would, creating jobs, building businesses, giving opportunities to those who wouldn't have them otherwise, yet all the hosts wanted to do was tear her down. Jenna insisted they weren't ignoring the good, but the good didn't erase the harmful aspects. Both truths could exist simultaneously. Kim laughed bitterly, asking what they expected. Should she delete her photos, stop posting, shut down her businesses? What would finally make them happy? The co-host replied they wanted honesty, acknowledgement of her influence, and for her to stop deflecting every time criticism came up. Kim demanded to know whose definition of responsible she was expected to follow, people who had never lived her life or worked in her industry. She said she was exhausted from being told what she should be by people who didn't understand her world. Jenna leaned forward sharply, saying Kim's entire industry was built on making women feel inadequate so they'd buy products to fix themselves. And as the face at the top of that system, Kim profited from it more than anyone else. She told Kim to own it. Kim refused, saying she wouldn't take responsibility for something that mischaracterized her work. She insisted she celebrated beauty and confidence, and if others saw that as promoting inadequacy, that was their projection, not her intent. The audience murmured uneasily, some siding with the hosts, others visibly sympathetic to Kim. The tension had reached a new peak. Jenna suddenly shifted to cultural appropriation, pointing out that Kim had repeatedly been criticized for borrowing aesthetics and hairstyles from Black culture while enjoying the protection of white privilege. She asked why Kim kept doing it despite apologizing in the past. Kim's face flushed red as she said she knew the topic was coming and accused the hosts of trying to paint her as a racist villain. She argued that she had black children, a diverse family, and deep respect for all cultures. The co-host shot back that having black children didn't exempt her from criticism, and that no one called her racist. This was about appropriation, about profiting off black culture, while black women were penalized for the same styles. Kim insisted she understood the difference and had worked to be respectful, but said that no matter what she did, people found something to criticize. Jenna rejected that as a cop-out, saying no one expected perfection, just accountability and willingness to listen when communities expressed that something was harmful. Instead, she said, Kim got defensive and cast herself as the victim. Kim's voice cracked slightly as she said she was a victim of constant harassment and scrutiny. Kim's voice trembled with anger as she declared she was a victim, someone constantly torn down no matter what she did. Waking up every day to thousands of hateful messages and relentless scrutiny of every move she made. The co-host calmly countered that while many people experienced online harassment, most didn't have the privilege of millions of dollars, legal teams, and PR professionals to shield them, adding that Kim's victimhood came from a very privileged place. That remark was the breaking point. Kim's entire demeanor shifted as she uncrossed her legs, leaned forward, and spoke with an icy firmness that hadn't been present before. She announced she was done with the interview, done with being disrespected in front of an audience, and done with being ambushed by hosts who she believed had an agenda from the start. Jenna quickly insisted there was no ambush, only legitimate questions. But Kim fired back that what she experienced wasn't journalism, was a hit job disguised as a conversation. She accused the hosts of turning the interview into a courtroom where she had already been found guilty before speaking a word. Jenna tried to calm her, saying difficult conversations weren't attacks and asking Kim to breathe and continue. But Kim refused, saying the hosts only wanted viral clips and the satisfaction of taking down a celebrity on live TV. The co-host raised her hands, insisting their goal was to understand Kim's perspective and offer her the chance to address issues people constantly discussed. Kim scoffed, accusing them of cornering her, ganging up on her 2 against 1, and never giving her a moment to exist without interrogation. She said the entire segment was a pylon, and she wouldn't sit there as their punching bag. Jenna softened her tone, saying she understood Kim's frustration, but insisted these conversations needed to happen because Kim had an enormous global influence. But Kim wasn't convinced. She accused the hosts of using their platform to settle a personal score, asking whether she had unknowingly offended them because everything felt targeted and personal. Jenna firmly denied it, saying it was about accountability and asking the questions their viewers wanted answered. That was their job. Kim, now furious, began unhooking her microphone pack, saying they could do their job with someone else because she refused to be humiliated on live television. Gasps rippled through the audience as producers scrambled off camera, unsure how to handle the unfolding meltdown. The co-host tried once more, begging Kim not to end things this way and suggesting they reset. Kim laughed bitterly as she pulled the mic off completely, insisting the hosts couldn't unsay what they said or undo the disrespect piled on her for 20 minutes. They wanted to make her look bad. Mission accomplished. Jenna stood from her chair, insisting nobody was trying to make Kim look bad and that her own responses determined how she appeared. If she couldn't handle tough questions, maybe that was something she needed to reflect on. Kim froze, staring at Jenna in shock and fury, before declaring she'd spent her entire career answering questions, including ones far more hostile than these. But those interviewers had been honest about their intentions. Here, the hosts pretended it would be friendly and blindsided her instead. The co-host argued they hadn't blindsided her at all. Every topic they brought up was already part of public conversation, and Kim should have expected them. Kim slung her purse over her shoulder and said the real issue was that the hosts believed they were morally superior, hiding behind social issues while using her for ratings. Jenna denied that, saying they booked Kim for an honest conversation and thought she'd engage with criticism instead of running from it. That accusation made Kim's voice rise sharply. She wasn't running, she was refusing to participate in her own character assassination. If they couldn't see the difference. That proved their bias. The co-host made one last attempt, urging Kim to sit, discuss her new projects, and shift to a positive ending. But Kim said there was no positive note because the hosts had already shown what they thought of her, painting her as everything wrong with society. Why pretend things were pleasant? Jenna crossed her arms and said, leaving when things got uncomfortable wasn't mature. Kim turned slowly, repeating the word mature with disbelief. True maturity, she said, would have been telling her up front that they planned to grill her. Maturity would have been dialogue instead of prosecution, and treating her like a human being rather than a target. She told the hosts not to lecture her on maturity when they had shown none. The studio fell silent. Even the crew froze. Jenna insisted they had treated Kim like a human being, an adult responsible for her actions and words. If Kim couldn't handle that, it wasn't their fault. Kim took a step forward, looked like she might say more, then only shook her head in disgust. She hoped they were proud of themselves and enjoyed watching the clip go viral. That's what they wanted, a spectacle. And they got it. She turned and walked away past cameras, past stunned crew members, past producers trying to stop her without glancing back. Jenna called after her, but Kim pushed through the studio door and disappeared, leaving behind a rattled audience and hosts unsure of what to do. The camera continued rolling as the co-host finally muttered that the moment was unexpected, and Jenna admitted they'd touched a nerve, several nerves. A nervous laugh rippled through the audience, unable to cut through the thick tension.